We have more now on the breaking news in Canada's auto industry. Stellantis is moving Jeep Compass production that was planned for its Brampton, Ontario plant to the U.S. That Brampton plant has effectively been on the front line of the U.S. trade war since President Donald Trump announced his plan to bring auto tariffs back in February. Retooling has been on hold, and more than 3,000 unionized Stellantis workers have been on layoff. Stellantis does say it has plans for the Brampton plant, but the automaker says it wants to hold discussions with governments before saying more.
The sound of metal once filled the air in Brampton. Sparks from the assembly line used to light up the plant floor like fireworks, thousands of workers moving in rhythm, building the kind of vehicles that define generations of Canadian pride. But now, that sound is gone. The lights are off. And for 3,000 families, the future has gone silent. They didn't find out in a meeting. They didn't hear it from a supervisor. They got an automated message. A cold, robotic voice announcing that Stellantis was moving Jeep Compass production out of Canada and into the United States. Just like that, decades of loyalty were reduced to a digital goodbye. This wasn't some random business decision. It was the result of a perfect storm, a trade war that Canada never prepared for and leadership that failed to fight back. When President Donald Trump reimposed auto tariffs earlier this year, he didn't have to swing a hammer. The pressure alone was enough. Manufacturing in Canada became a losing game overnight. The numbers didn't lie. Tariffs on Canadian goods were hitting 35%, while Mexico faced only 25%. That 10-point gap was the difference between survival and extinction. Stellantis looked at the math. Staying in Canada meant bleeding cash. Moving to America meant profit. They didn't choose betrayal. They chose survival. And yet, on the Canadian side, chaos followed. Premier Doug Ford stormed into cameras promising to fight for Ontario jobs. But those words rang hollow. Every promise he's made to protect the industrial base has turned into another headline, another failure. Oshawa, Ingersoll, Loyalist Township, now Brampton. Each time, the same performance: anger, outrage, and zero results.
Before moving forward, do subscribe for Parliament updates.
While Ford yelled, Prime Minister Mark Carney said nothing. The man who rose to power on economic credibility vanished when it mattered most. Not a statement, not a plan, not even a symbolic visit to the workers whose futures had just evaporated. His silence said it all: global reputation over domestic responsibility. Lana Payne, the national president of Unifor, called it what it was: a devastating blow that could have been avoided. Workers had been waiting 9 months for clarity while politicians debated talking points. 9 months of uncertainty, bills piling up, and promises that never materialized. When the decision finally came, it came as a text message. That's not just bad communication, that's corporate cruelty. The economic fallout is enormous, but the human toll cuts deeper. Families who built their lives around this plant are watching everything crumble. Local restaurants that fed line workers, the small garages that repaired their cars, even the daycare centers that cared for their kids, all tied to a single heartbeat that's now stopped. Brampton's mayor, Patrick Brown, called it a punch to the gut. He's right. The city poured billions into Stellantis through subsidies, tax breaks, and retooling programs meant to secure its future. And what's left? Empty parking lots, broken promises, and a community that gave everything only to be abandoned. But here's the truth no one in Ottawa wants to say out loud: Stellantis didn't flee because of Trump's bullying. They left because the United States made it worth their while. Lower taxes. Predictable regulations. Energy independence. The kind of environment that rewards production instead of punishing it. Canada, on the other hand, suffocated its own manufacturers with high energy costs, endless red tape, and the constant threat of new carbon taxes.
Workers. Lana is joining us this morning from Toronto. Good morning, and thank you for making some time for us today.
Good morning. Thanks, Hillary, for having me as well.
I'm hoping to get some of your initial reaction, what you thought of, what went through your mind when you first heard this Stellantis announcement.
It's been a very, very difficult year, Hillary, for all of our members across many sectors of the economy, particularly the auto sector, and now, of course, the forestry sector too. We have been pressuring governments since the start of the year when Donald Trump basically launched this trade war against Canadian workers and Canadian industries. We've also been pressuring companies to keep production here in Canada.
For years, Canadian leaders bragged about being global champions of sustainability and social justice. But what good are those values when your people can't find work? When your factories close? When your cities crumble? You can't build an economy on speeches and symbolism. You build it on steel, sweat, and strategy, three things Canada has forgotten how to protect. Trump understood leverage. His tariffs weren't just economic weapons, they were negotiation tools. He knew that by squeezing Canada, companies would come running to the US for relief. And it worked. Brampton is proof. Stellantis didn't relocate because it wanted to. It relocated because Canada gave it every reason to. Now the ripple effect begins. Auto parts suppliers are cutting shifts. Trucking companies are rerouting operations south of the border. Local businesses that relied on factory wages are bracing for impact. What's happening in Brampton isn't an isolated tragedy, it's a signal. Windsor could be next. London could be next. This is how industrial ecosystems collapse, one plant, one layoff, one empty paycheck at a time. The irony is staggering. Canada once built the machines that powered the continent. Today it imports the same cars it used to make. The country that prided itself on economic balance has become dependent on the very markets it helped create. That's not progress, that's decay wearing a polite smile. Workers who spent decades perfecting their craft are now left wondering if their skills even matter anymore. These are people who built Jeeps with their bare hands, who trained apprentices, who raised families on honest labor. And all they got in return was a pre-recorded message telling them their time was up. It's not just jobs being lost, it's identity. The hum of machinery, the smell of oil, the rhythm of production, all fading into memory. Brampton's assembly line wasn't just a workplace. It was a community, a legacy, a symbol of what Canada could achieve when industry and people worked hand in hand. That symbol has now been boxed up and shipped across the border. And yet, Canada's leaders act surprised, as if they didn't see this coming. They saw it. They just chose not to act. Because acting would have meant confronting uncomfortable truths, that the country's regulatory obsession, its punitive tax system, and its addiction to political theater are killing its ability to compete. Instead, they blamed Trump, blamed corporations, blamed everything but themselves. The truth is, the world doesn't owe Canada its factories. Companies go where they can thrive, not where they're lectured. Stellantis made its choice. Now the question is, how many more will follow? Days after the announcement, the Brampton plant stood eerily quiet. The massive parking lots once overflowing with cars now sat empty, a graveyard of untold stories. A few workers showed up just to stare through the gates, men and women who gave half their lives to this factory, unable to believe that something so permanent could vanish overnight. Some took photos. Others cried. A few just stood in silence, trying to make sense of how their country had failed them. It wasn't supposed to end this way. Stellantis had once promised retooling, modernization, a new era of Canadian auto production. Billions of taxpayer dollars were poured into keeping the company rooted here. But those promises turned into placeholders. The retooling stopped. The funding went quiet. And while the workers waited, the US quietly courted Stellantis with incentives, subsidies, and a clear message: come home. They listened. Patrick Brown, Brampton's mayor, tried to stay composed on camera. But even he couldn't hide his frustration. His city had invested everything in Stellantis: land, infrastructure, goodwill. And all of it had been betrayed. It's a punch to the gut, he said. Behind that calm voice was a truth that every mayor across Ontario now fears: if it happened here, it can happen anywhere. Behind closed doors, Ford's government scrambled to spin the story. They blamed Trump's tariffs, they blamed global supply chains, they even blamed environmental activists for making investment too complicated. What they didn't do was accept responsibility for a system that punishes production and rewards performative politics. The premier's promises had turned into theater, fiery speeches with no follow-through, staged outrage that changed nothing. Then there's Mark Carney, the man who once lectured the world about economic resilience. In the middle of a national manufacturing crisis, the Prime Minister stayed silent. Not a single statement addressing the workers. Not one acknowledgement of their loss. He'll attend international summits to talk about climate transitions and digital economies, but when it comes to defending the actual industrial base that feeds the country, nothing. Just quiet detachment. And that's the story of modern Canada: outrage without action, leadership without backbone, governance without grit. Meanwhile, across the border, Trump's America is booming. New factories are breaking ground in Michigan, Ohio, and Tennessee. Governors are cutting ribbons while Canadian workers line up at unemployment offices. U.S. tax breaks, energy security, and deregulated frameworks are pulling investment like a magnet. The contrast couldn't be more brutal. America rewards production. Canada regulates it to death. The ripple effects are starting to show. In Windsor, suppliers are freezing hiring. In London, small parts manufacturers are scaling back operations. Transport companies that once hauled parts to Brampton are now redirecting routes toward Detroit. The collapse is spreading quietly, one business decision at a time. Economists call it industrial migration. But on the ground, it looks more like economic evacuation. And the numbers are staggering: 150,000 direct auto sector jobs, 500,000 connected to supply chains, all hanging in the balance. When a single plant goes dark, it's not just a local tragedy. It's a national hemorrhage. Every closure bleeds into the next, weakening the industrial ecosystem until there's nothing left to rebuild. Lana Payne said it best: if we're not willing to fight for these jobs, what are we willing to fight for? Her words cut through the noise because they expose a simple truth: Canada isn't losing its factories by accident. It's losing them by design. By policies that make it nearly impossible for companies to stay. By leadership that measures success in applause instead of output. By governments more concerned with being admired abroad than respected at home. For years, Canada told itself that the future didn't belong to factories, that the age of industrial work was behind us. Instead, the country bet everything on green innovation, digital transformation, and inclusive growth. All noble goals, but you can't code a car. You can't replace a factory with a seminar. Progress means nothing if it leaves people behind. In the bars and cafes around Brampton, workers still gather, swapping stories about their last shifts, the rumors they heard, the promises they believed. Some talk about moving to the U.S. where new plants are hiring. Others are too old to start over. They just want answers. They want someone to admit that their livelihoods were sacrificed for politics, that they were collateral damage in a trade war their leaders never took seriously. Every time a leader blames someone else, the message to those workers is clear: you don't matter. Because if you did, someone would have fought harder. It's not just about Brampton. It's about what Canada is becoming: a country where ambition is punished and competence is optional. Where the phrase "made in Canada" has turned from a badge of honor into a fading memory. You can't build national pride on imported products. You can't preach prosperity while exporting opportunity. The auto crisis is exposing something deeper: a leadership vacuum. The people in charge are not builders. They are managers of decline. They watch the walls crumble and call it transition. They watch jobs disappear and call it market correction. And when citizens demand answers, they hide behind committees and consultations until the outrage fades. But here's the hard truth: outrage won't save Brampton. Speeches won't bring those jobs back. What Canada needs isn't another task force. It needs a reckoning. A total rethinking of how this country values work, investment, and production. Because if it doesn't, this story will keep repeating, plant by plant, job by job, town by town. Ford will keep shouting. Carney will keep whispering. Trump will keep winning. And Canadian workers will keep losing. The Brampton disaster is not an end, it's a beginning, the opening chapter of a slow-motion collapse. Windsor will feel it next. Then London. Then every manufacturing hub that once powered Ontario's prosperity. Each closure will be met with another press conference, another promise, another round of political blame.
Well, thank you so
and
much.
through it
I
all,
just
the
wanna
factories will stay
start
dark.
by thanking my fellow
Because this
premiers.
isn't just
I always say I
economics.
have a team of champions
It's culture.
for such a
It's
positive
identity.
and productive meeting
For
over the last
generations,
few days.
Canada was a country that built
I'm proud
things,
to stand
real
shoulder to
things,
shoulder
tangible
with my
things,
fellow
things that
premiers
lasted.
as Team Canada,
Cars,
Canada,
engines,
and it's
steel.
never been more important,
Now it builds narratives,
and never
hashtags,
been,
and
more
excuses.
united since I've
It
been
celebrates
premier for the last
progress while
7
outsourcing it.
and a bit years.
It preaches
Over the last
sustainability
3
while
days,
importing everything that
Canada's
sustains it.
premiers have worked hard to
And
move
that's the
forward
tragedy,
on
not
our
that
shared
Canada lost a
priorities.
plant, but that it stopped
We've
believing
met
in
with the
itself.
Indigenous leaders
When
and frontline
Stellantis
healthcare
announced the
workers.
move, the official
We sat
statement
down
said they
with
were
Prime Minister Carney,
reevaluating
and
production
that's the first
strategies
time
in
that's
light of
happened,
global trade
to
realities.
discuss ongoing
But what that really
negotiations
meant
with the
was
US
simple: Canada's
and how
no
we're
longer
working together
competitive.
to build a stronger,
Not because its
more
people aren't
competitive
skilled.
economy.
Not because its
We met as
workers aren't
premiers
dedicated.
and talked about the issues
But
that
because
matter
its leaders
most
made it
to the
impossible
people
to
we
win.
serve.
The
We
workers know it.
talked about standing up
The unions
for
know
workers
it.
in the face
The
of
mayors
President
know
Trump's
it.
tariffs.
The only ones
talked
pretending
about
not to
cutting
see
red
it are the
tape,
ones with microphones
opening
and
internal
motorcades.
markets,
They'll say,
and
we're
building
exploring
a
solutions,
stronger,
we're
more
monitoring the
self-reliant
situation,
economy.
and we're engaging
We talked
stakeholders.
about the need for real
But
bail
behind the
reform
scenes, they're
that
just
keeps
hoping the
criminals
outrage
behind
fades before the
bars
next
and
election.
keeps our communities safe.
It won't fade.
Prime Minister
Not this
Carney
time.
has made it very clear
Because Brampton's not just
in the
losing
comments
jobs, it's
to
losing
premiers,
faith.
and will be holding
And faith,
him
once
accountable
gone,
on bail
doesn't
reform.
return easily.
Premiers are
In
also
America,
calling
somewhere
for
in a brand new
stronger provincial
factory,
role
the first
in
Jeep Compass
immigration.
rolls off the line.
For one
Cameras
simple
flash.
reason. We know
Workers
our
cheer.
labor markets best.
Executives smile.
At our first
A car
ministers'
that should have
meetings,
carried a Made in Canada badge
Prime
now
Minister
bears the
Carney
words built
agreed.
in the USA.
Yesterday, at a
The difference
meeting of
isn't
federal and
geography,
provincial
it's
immigration
leadership.
ministers,
Back
the
in
federal
Ontario,
immigration
the gates of the
minister
Brampton plant
wasn't
stand
on
shut.
the same page
The wind whips through
as
the
her
empty
prime
lots
minister.
where thousands of cars
We
once
need the Prime
gleamed under
Minister
factory
to
lights.
be very, very
The
clear
silence is
with
heavy,
his minister.
broken only by the hum
She
of
needs
distant
to work
traffic,
with
the sound of movement, of life, of everything that's now happening somewhere else. And for those who still believe Canada can come back from this, the question isn't what went wrong. The question is whether anyone in power has the courage to make it right. Until then, the story of Brampton will stand as a warning, a monument to missed chances, a cautionary tale written in steel and silence. Because once a country stops fighting for the people who build it, it stops being built at all.
Canada debates.